We are looking for your donations. By the way, welcome back to the Zach and Matt Show. We are in New Hampshire live. Donate, 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 donate.
All right, how y'all doing this evening? Good. I got two jobs. One job is to kill lots of time when necessary. Lucky you. I don't need that job. He is in the building. Elvis is in the building. The second job is to make sure you are properly warmed up in a matter of about 2 minutes so that you can meet the next President of the United States properly jacked up. Real quick. So I'm a Manchester native. I used to be the mayor of Portsmouth. My name's Steve Marchand. If you like state and local politics, the name may have crossed the grass. Used to be mayor of Portsmouth and ran for governor as a Democrat in 2018. The good news is I made a lot of friends. The bad news is this just in, I did not win. And that means I had more time on my hands than I anticipated I would. And I used an hour of it to meet Andrew Yang. Pretty good choice. January of 2019, 13 months ago, Rich Street Cafe. 5 minutes in, I knew we were going to be friends. 44 years old, first generation American, father of two, really likes math. Holy crap, that was me, in a mirror almost. An hour later, I realized I didn't just make a new friend. I had met somebody who should be the next president of the United States. How do you feel about that sentiment? Here's the thing. Tomorrow we got ourselves an election. You may have read about it. And we're going to actually give you the results on the same day that you cast the votes. I did not realize that was novel. But the other 48 states, they haven't voiced anything yet. And we have a responsibility that goes back over half a century actually, to provide some guidance, to provide an opportunity for the rest of the country to see what we're very lucky to get to see on a first-hand basis. We need Andrew Yang to be in a position tomorrow where he can go to Nevada, South Carolina, Super Tuesday and beyond, so that people can see what the face of the Democratic Party and the country can be. For the last 4 years, we have heard too much about a president that represents often the worst of what America has been. And one of the things that I love so much about Andrew is I believe he represents the best of what we can be. An optimistic voice, relentlessly optimistic. He represents a diverse and young and innovative and entrepreneurial and friendly and approachable and data-driven and really funny and charming and earnest face and voice of what America can be, the next generation of our party, of our country. That's what Andrew Yang represents. One last thing I want to tell you. This is important. Tell your friends tonight after this event. Tell your friends tomorrow before they go out and vote. Too many people think you're going to have to choose tomorrow and settle. That you can pick somebody who represents a transformation of our economy. To move away from the inequality that has ravaged and has also driven us in the arms of Donald Trump. Are you looking for somebody who will transform this economy and rewrite the rules of the 21st century to help all of us? You like that? Good. And then there are some people that say, that's great, but you can't get that. Instead, just pick the person with the best chance of beating Donald Trump. Who here would like to defeat Donald Trump in November? Some folks say you gotta choose. You really want him to lose. Your hand is still up, thank you. But you don't have to choose. It's a false choice. There's one candidate who lets you have the best chance to beat Donald Trump, who gives us the best chance to transform this economy, rewrite the rules for the 21st century in a way that helps all of us. The good news is, you don't have to wonder who it is, because he's in the building. Ladies and gentlemen, the next president of the United States is right there, baby. Andrew Yang.
Hello, Manchester, how are you? It's great to be here with you all. push our country in a new direction. You're among the most powerful and influential people in our nation today. I know it may not feel like it. You're just living your lives, checking out the presidential candidates. But I've done the math. Do you know how many Californians each of you is worth? 1,000 Californians each, that's right. So look around this beautiful space. How many of us are together? I'm going to give a Trumpian estimate. There are 7,000 people here. Looks like there are about 200 people here. But 200 Granite Staters is the equivalent of 5 football stadiums full of Californians of voting power. That's the power to do something that most of our fellow Americans can only dream about, which is flush the pipes of our government clean of all the lobbyists and corporate cash that have been running our capital for far too long. I'm actually very, very comfortable here in New Hampshire, in part because I went to high school here. I graduated from Phillips Exeter Academy in 1992. How many of you knew I went to high school? They had me back to speak last year, and I told them I hadn't been back in a long time because I didn't really enjoy my time at the school. And then the student body erupted in applause. I said, I didn't intend that reaction. And after high school, I went to college in Rhode Island, not that far from here at Brown University. I went to law school in New York and became an unhappy lawyer for 5 months. And then I left to start a business. How many of you all have started a business or organization or a club or a mailing list? Who would raise your hand? Well, if you have your hand up, you know a couple things. Number one, it's much harder than anyone lets on. Number two, when someone asks you how it's going, what do you say?
Awesome!
Great. Yes, my business too went great until it failed. My parents told people I was still a lawyer. But I've been bitten by the bug. I worked at another small company, then another, and then I became the CEO of an education company that grew to become number one in the US and was bought by a bigger company in 2009. 2009 was a really tough time in a lot of the country. How many of you were here in New Hampshire in 2009? So you remember that time. It was a financial crisis. It was pummeling many, many communities and families. And I thought I had some insight as to why the financial crisis had happened, why our economy had tanked. It was because so many of the wannabe whiz kids I'd gone to Exeter and Brown and Columbia with had gone straight to Wall Street and helped create mortgage-backed securities and financial derivatives and exotic financial instruments. And I thought, what a train wreck that is. That's like the opposite of what you want people to do. So at this point, I quit my job to start a nonprofit to help create jobs in Detroit, Cleveland, St. Louis, Baltimore, and other cities around the country. How many of you all work at a nonprofit now? How many of you all volunteer at a nonprofit? You should really raise your hand to that second one. That was like, are you a nice person? You could be like, I was nice that one time. So to start a nonprofit the way I did it, incorporated a 501c3, put some of our savings into the organization to found it, and then started calling rich friends with this question: do you love America? And the smart among them said, what does it mean if I say yes? And I said, at least $10,000. So I raised a couple $100,000, grew to the millions, helped create several thousand jobs in the Midwest and the South over the next 7 years. Honored by the Obama administration multiple times, so I got to bring my wife Evelyn to meet the president. My in-laws were very excited about me that week. But I had this sinking feeling while traveling the Midwest and the South that things were getting better, not worse, in so many communities. How many of you are from the Midwest? The South? So you may have a sense of this, where if you cross between parts of our country, you feel like you're crossing dimensions and decades and ways of life and not just a few time zones. But I was still surprised when Donald Trump became our president in 2016. You all remember that night well. How did you react when Donald Trump won? And nausea, tears, bourbon, pasta. I reacted the same way, not that same way, but the same way as most of you, where I said, oh my gosh, tens of millions of our fellow Americans decided to take a bet on a narcissist reality TV star. That is not business as usual. And we all had family members and friends and neighbors who celebrated his victory. Now, we've been presented a whole series of explanations ever since that night to today as to why Donald Trump won. I know you've seen a lot of the same explanations I have. Go ahead and shout out a reason why we're supposed to believe Donald Trump won.
Russia.
Russia.
Because Bernie fans all voted for Bernie.
Yes, Hillary Clinton / the DNC.
Electoral college.
Electoral college, yes. Globalization of jobs. Electoral college.
The economy.
Facebook, the FBI,
The economy.
Comey.
What did something to the Midwest? Loss of jobs.
Yes, I'm with you on this, sir. We're going to come back to this. But I just want to close this loop. Racism, sexism, fear, misinformation, people giving up, turnout, apathy. These are the reasons we've generally been presented. But I want to come back to what he said. What's your name, sir? So Dave shouted out an explanation that I actually found independently in the numbers. Where I'm a numbers guy in Manchester, I went looking through the data for an explanation and I found it. And it's a lot like what Dave just said. We eliminated 4 million manufacturing jobs in this country over the last number of years. And where were those jobs primarily located? Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri, Iowa, all the swing states that Donald Trump needed to win and did win. And if you doubt this explanation, there's a straight line up between the adoption of industrial automation in a voting area and the movement of Trump in that area. It's one of the strongest correlations you can find. This may be familiar to many of you because the same thing happened in New Hampshire a little bit earlier. We eliminated over 12,000 manufacturing jobs here in New Hampshire, mainly in the northern part of the state. And if you've been to those towns after the mill closed, the shopping district closed, people left, the school shrank, and that town has never recovered. I saw the same thing in communities in Missouri, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania. And what we did to those manufacturing jobs is now shifting to other parts of our economy. How many of you noticed stores closing around where you work and live? And why are those stores closing? Amazon's the main reason. Amazon's soaking up $20 billion in business every single year, closing 30% of America's stores and malls. The most common job in the economy is retail clerk. The average retail clerk is a 39-year-old woman making between $8 and $12 an hour. What is her next opportunity going to be after the store closes? We're not sure. How much did Amazon pay in taxes last year? Zero. That is the math, Manchester. 20 billion out, 30% of your stores close, most common job disappears over time, and you get zero back. These are changes you can see around us at the CVS, the McDonald's, the grocery store, but the changes are more pervasive than most of us realize. When you all call the customer service line of a big company and you get the bot or software on the other end, chances are you do the same thing I do, which is you dial 000, say human, representative, until you get someone on the line. Raise your hand if that's what you do. Oh yeah, we all do that. That software is miserable. We're all like, a person must work at this company somewhere, and I will now find that person. But in a few short years, Manchester, the software is going to start sounding like this. Hello, Andrew, how are you? What can I do for you? It'll be fast, seamless, efficient. What will that mean for the 2.5 million Americans who work at call centers right now, making $10 to $14 an hour? How many of you all know a truck driver here in New Hampshire? It's the most common job in 29 states, 3.5 million truckers, 94% men, average age 49. My friends in California are working on robot trucks that can drive themselves. They say they're 98% of the way there. A robot truck just transported 20 tons of butter from California to Pennsylvania last month with no human intervention. Why did they choose butter for this maiden voyage? I have no idea. But if you Google robot butter truck, you can find the story. And at the end of the route was a giant sack of pancakes. I made up the pancakes, but everything else is totally real. What will self-driving trucks eventually mean for the 3.5 million truckers, or the 7 million Americans plus who work at truck stops, motels, and diners that rely upon the truckers getting out and having a meal every day? We're in the midst of the greatest economic and technological transformation in the history of our country, what experts are calling the fourth industrial revolution. Chances are this is the first time you've heard a politician even say the words fourth industrial revolution, and I am barely a politician. Imagine being an entrepreneur who helped create thousands of jobs in the Midwest and the South, and then realized that your work is like pouring water into a bathtub that has a giant hole ripped in the bottom. That the water is just rushing out faster and stronger. That water rushing out helps put Donald Trump in the White House. Our country does not understand what's happening to it. We're scapegoating immigrants for problems immigrants have very little to do with. When you go to a factory in Michigan, you do not find wall-to-wall immigrants doing work. What do you find? Wall-to-wall robot arms and machines doing the work that people used to do. The simplest way to think about this transition is that the technology, the AI, the robots, are getting more powerful, more capable, and smarter all the time, and we are not. Now, these little guys, they're getting smarter, but the adults in the room, we feel grateful if we stayed the same on any given day and didn't get any dumber. And we can still find our keys, that's a good day. But that's not the way technology is working. Technology is getting more powerful in a way that most of us can barely understand. We're in the most extreme winner-take-all economy in the history of the world right now, and it's about to get a lot more extreme when a lot of these technologies start hitting. So I went to our leaders in DC in 2017. I asked them, what are we going to do to help our people manage this transition? And what do you think the folks in DC said to me when I asked them, what are we going to do? Put the DC hat on, it's fun. Yeah, the three answers I got most commonly were these. Number one, we cannot talk about this. Number two, we should study this further. And number three, you've heard this one, we must educate and retrain all Americans for the jobs of the future. Raise your hand if you've heard that. I know, we've all heard that. Well, I'm the math guy in Manchester. I looked at the studies. Do you all want to guess how effective the government-funded retraining programs were for the manufacturing workers who lost their jobs in the Midwest? You know it's low. I'm here for my coding retraining program. Like, get me the laptop. That's not the way people operate. The success rates of these programs were very, very low, 0 to 15%. The truth is that almost half of the manufacturing workers who lost their jobs in the Midwest left the workforce and never worked again. Of that group, almost half filed for disability. We then saw surges in suicides and drug overdoses in these communities to the point that America's life expectancy declined for 3 years in a row. Do you know the last time America's life expectancy declined for 3 years in a row? It's a little bit before World War II. The Great Depression's a good guess. It is the Spanish flu of 1918, a global pandemic that killed millions around the world. You have to go back 100 years to find another period in American history like this one, because it is highly unusual for life expectancy to ever go down in a developed country. It ordinarily just goes up because you're getting richer, stronger, healthier. But here in the US, it went down and then down and then down again. When I said this to the folks in DC, one person said something that sent me here to you all tonight in Manchester. He said, Andrew, you are in the wrong town. No one here in DC will do anything about this, because fundamentally this is a town of followers, not leaders. And the only way we would do something about it is if you were to create a wave in other parts of the country and bring that wave crashing down on our heads. I said, challenge accepted. Because you can be that wave tomorrow. I'm standing before you. I've already outcompeted half a dozen sitting senators, governors, members of Congress. We raised $16.5 million in increments of only $35 each last quarter. So my fans are almost as cheap as Bernie's. But there was no corporate PAC money in there. This is an uprising of the people to take back our government and get it working for us again. Because who has our government been working for the past number of years and decades? Corporate profits are climbing and life expectancy is trending down. Which do you care about? If you're us, you clearly care about life expectancy because it's our lives. But in DC, they can't see people and life expectancy anymore. They're just following the money. Washington, D.C. today is the richest city in our country. Think about that for a second. What do they produce? None of us knows. But business seems awfully good. Donald Trump said he wanted to drain the swamp. Manchester, I want to do something a little bit different. I want to distribute the swamp. Why do you employ hundreds of thousands of government workers in the most expensive city in the country? Why wouldn't you move some of those jobs to Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire? You would save billions of dollars immediately, and I would argue that those agencies would make better decisions because they were living someplace normal and not in the DC bubble where they just talk to each other all day. I'm for term limits for members of Congress. Our representatives should be headed to DC to do our work and then come home. They should not go and say, ooh, I like it here, let me stay. And I know how we can pass it. I will be your president a year from now, thank you, Manchester. And then we'll go to Congress and say we should have 12-year term limits, both houses. But current lawmakers are exempt. Do you think they'll pass that? Yes. Oh yeah, they'll pass that the next day. They'll say, we do this for the American people. Because it doesn't affect them. Like, whatever. But eventually they'll lose, they'll get phased out, and we'll wind up with a legislature that actually is much more dynamic and responsive. The biggest problem out of Washington is that corporate money just runs that town. And I'm going to tell a New Hampshire story. I had a friend from Exeter who went to work on Capitol Hill. Good man, best of intentions, said he would never become a lobbyist. How does the story end? He's a lobbyist. That's what's going on in that town right now. If you have money on one side and people on the other, the money is winning every time. There was a satirical headline in The Onion that I thought was really funny, but it was apropos. It said, the American people hire a lobbyist to represent our interests in Capitol Hill. Like, that's the only thing we would get anything done, you know? Like the lobbyist walks in the office, I'm here to represent the American people. Stop screwing us, please. So how do we actually get the people and the money on the same side? Right now, 5% of Americans donate to political candidates or campaigns. So if you're in that 5%, pat yourself on the back, you're one of the most highly politically engaged people in the country. My plan to wash out the lobbyist cash is to give every American voter 100 democracy dollars that you can give to any candidate or campaign you want every year, use it or lose it. What percentage of Americans would donate to a campaign if you had 100 free dollars you could use? What do you think? Probably not as high as like, it's not going to be like 90 or 100% because you can't get all Americans to do anything. But if you got it to 50%, which I think is very reasonable, that would be enough to wash out the lobbyist cash by a factor of 4 to 1. Because if you can imagine it, you get 10,000 people behind you to give you their democracy dollars, $100 each, that's $1 million. And then when the lobbyist comes and says, I've got $60,000 for you, you're like, I don't want to touch your $60,000 because they're going to notice. They're backing me. This is how we get the people and the money together on the same side. Now, as important as it is to get the government working for us again, it's even more important to get this economy working for you, your families, our kids. If you're here tonight, you probably know that I'm running on this very dramatic sounding proposal that we give $1,000 a month to every American starting at age 18 until the day you expire. Raise your hand if you know that's what I'm running on. Now keep your hand up if you think that's too good to be true and unrealistic. She's like, maybe. I understand completely, but this is not my idea and it's not a new idea. Thomas Paine was for this at the founding of our country, called it the citizen's dividend for all Americans. Martin Luther King fought for this in the 1960s. It is what he was fighting for when he was killed in 1968. I know this in part because I met with his son in Atlanta, who said this is what his dad was fighting for. I have to say the most fascinating part of that conversation was having someone refer to Martin Luther King as Dad. I was like, wow, Dad. His name was Martin Luther King III, so, added up, but still. Milton Friedman, the patron saint of libertarian economists, and 1,000 other economists, endorsed this plan in the 1960s. It was so mainstream it passed the U.S. House of Representatives twice in 1971 under Richard Nixon, Family Assistance Plan, where we guaranteed an income floor for all American households. And then 11 years later, one state passed a dividend where now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. And what state is that? Alaska. And how does Alaska pay for it? Oil. And what is the oil of the 21st century? Data, technology, AI, self-driving cars and trucks. A new study came out that said that our data, your data, is now worth more than oil. How many of you saw that study? How many of you got your data check in the mail last month? If your data is now worth billions of dollars a year and you are not seeing a dime of it, then where is all of that money going? Facebook, Amazon, Google, Apple, the trillion-dollar tech companies that are paying nothing or next to nothing back into our country. You have this sinking feeling that there's value leaving your community that's not coming back. You've been right. That is what's happening. What we have to do is we have to reach up and get that value that's leaving your community and bring it back. Put it into your hands in the form of this dividend of $1,000 a month. Particularly because after this money is in your hands, where will it go? How much of it will stay right here in New Hampshire? Most of it. Not all of it. You might get your own Netflix password. At another event, someone was like, never. But most of the money would go right into car repairs you've been putting off, and daycare expenses, and Little League signups, and local nonprofits, and religious organizations. This is the trickle-up economy, our people, our families, our communities up. This is how we balance out the most extreme winner-take-all economy in the history of the world, which is what we're in right now, and make it work for families as well as big companies, for rural towns as well as big cities. This should have happened decades ago. This is why we feel so stretched out. Raise your hand if you're a parent like me. If you're a parent, you have the sinking feeling that we're leaving our kids a future that is less bright, less prosperous, and less secure than the lives that we have left. Why do we feel that way? Because it is that way. If you were born in the 1940s in the United States of America, there was a 93% chance you're going to do better than your parents did. That's the American dream. That's what brought my family here. That's what we aspire to for our kids. But if you were born in the 1990s in this country, you're down to a 50-50 shot and it is declining fast. That is why the parents feel the way we do. That is why young people feel that like the deck is stacked against you in ways it was not for previous generations. You're right. It is. This is what we have to turn around. This is why Democrats are making a mistake when they act like Donald Trump is the source of all of our problems. He is not. He is the symptom of a disease that has been building up in our communities for years. It is very difficult to be optimistic about the country and the future if you're not optimistic about your kids' futures. Imagine a country where we could look our kids in the eyes and say to them, your country loves you, your country values you, and your country will invest in you and your future. That is what we can make real tomorrow. This is how we can cure the disease. Right now we're being told all the time about how great things are. Stock market prices, record highs. Corporate profits, record highs. GDP, record high. Headline unemployment looks great. Corporate profits are at record highs. What else are at record highs in the United States of America right now? The debt, suicides, substance abuse, overdose rates, student loan debt, stress, anxiety, depression, the temperature, medical bankruptcy, the debt. You know what are at record lows right now in the United States of America? Starting a business for a young person, getting married, having a child, all the things you'd associate with a healthy, thriving society are at record lows. I know how flawed our economic measurements are because of my family. My wife is at home with our 2 boys right now, one of whom is autistic. How much is her work valued at in our economic measurements? Ellen gets a 0. How about every other stay-at-home parent in the country? 0. How about volunteers and activists trying to do something positive in the community? How about most coaches and mentors looking out for our kids? Much of the time, 0. Most artists? Now, one thing we don't talk about, but it's really crucial, Manchester, how about local journalists? We have put almost 2,000 local newspapers out of business over the last number of months because their advertising revenue went up to the cloud. You can't run a newspaper on that. And so now there are 200 counties in this country that don't have any local news at all. What does not function very well if you don't have any local news? Democracy. Because how can you vote on what's going on in your community if literally no one's covering what's going on in your community? These are the things we're supposed to value the most in our lives, our children, our families, our community, our democracy, and they're getting zeroed out one by one by one. They're getting zeroed out because we've been collectively convinced that economic value and human value are the same things. And if the market says you have no value, then you have no value. And what we have to say to our fellow Americans tomorrow is that we all have intrinsic value as citizens, as people, and as owners and shareholders in the richest country. We have to let our fellow Americans know that we and our families do This economy exists to serve us. I'm not running for president because I dreamt about being president. Those were not the conversations in the Yang household. My parents were not like, you're going to grow up to be president someday. They were more like, you're terrible, clean your room. I'm running because I'm a parent who can see the future we're leaving for our kids, and it is not something I'm willing to accept. They deserve better. We can do it better, and we don't have to get out and fight for a better future for them. It's impossible to solve a problem if you don't acknowledge the problem. Instead of pretending that corporate profits translates to how we are doing, we should start measuring our economic progress by how we are doing. Instead of GDP, this century-old measurement that we made up, and even the inventor said 100 years ago, this is a terrible measurement for national well-being, and we should never use it as that. And here we are 100 years later, riding it off a cliff. Artificial intelligence and self-driving trucks will be tremendous for GDP and corporate profits. They're going to be terrible for many Americans. So we have to start aligning how we're measuring our progress with how we are doing, our health and life expectancy, our mental health and freedom from substance abuse, our clean air and clean water, our children's success rates, how many of us can retire in quality circumstances. These are the real measurements of how we are doing, and as your president, I would present these numbers to you every year at the State of the Union. I'd be the first president to use a PowerPoint deck at the State of the Union. And if you like that visual, you're like, oh, I should vote for this guy just to see what the deck is. If we had a sense of these measures, we would see we're in a mental health crisis, we're in a wellness depression, we're in a civic engagement and volunteerism depression. All of the measurements of our health are trending the wrong direction, and this is what we have to fix, Manchester. Donald Trump's our president today because he had a very simple, compelling, and powerful message for our country. He said he was going to make America great again. What did Hillary Clinton say in response? America's already great. You remember that? It's been a long 3 years, I know, but it's now coming to an end. That response did not go over well for many Americans because the problems in our communities are all too real. We have to acknowledge their depth and severity and reality, but then we need real solutions that will actually move our country forward. What were Donald Trump's solutions? Build a wall, turn the clock back, bring the old jobs back. Manchester, you know we have to do the opposite of these things. We have to turn the clock forward. We have to accelerate our economy and society to rise to the real challenges of the 21st century, like climate change. We have to evolve in the way we see ourselves and our work and our value. I'm the ideal candidate for this job because the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. Thank you all very much. I think we have time for a question or two, and then we're going to probably do some kind of crazy scrum to take some pictures. So I'm not sure if we have a mic runner. Oh, hey, Shelby.
Who's got questions? I do. Okay, sure. Hello. My name is Christina. This is Brennan. And the question we have is, if you give every American that $1,000 every month, first of all, what's going to happen to the need-based programs like food stamps, TANF, Social Security? And second, what are you going to do to prevent landlords from raising prices once they know that we have more money?
Well, thank you for the question. The freedom dividend is universal and opt-in. It's taxed on top of Social Security. and it stacks on top of any housing benefits. It does not push you out into a range where you don't qualify for any means-tested programs. There are certain means-tested programs it does substitute for. The cash and cash-like equivalents, so something like heating oil subsidy or food stamps, you would have a choice between the current benefits, which are generally much less than $1,000, or the $1,000 in cash. When I've talked to families who are on means-tested programs, they actually express a lot of frustration that if they get a part-time job or whatnot, it actually reduces their benefits. And this is one way to make it better. Oh, it's a common concern that if people get this $1,000 a month, that prices will go up. I'm going to use a real-life example because it's sort of fun. What's a restaurant that people like here in Manchester, like if you want to go out and have a nice dinner? Puritan. Great. How much does dinner cost for one person at Puritan? 20 bucks? Let's say it's 20 bucks. All right, so let's say I'm your president, freedom dividend gets passed, you're in a good mood, you're like, let's celebrate. So then you go to Puritan, but instead of 20 bucks, it's 28 bucks. How do you react? You're like, what? You're like, this was 20 bucks last week, what happened here? And then maybe you go to another place, you go to Booba Noodles, which I just had noodles at, which was very tasty, Babu. Anyway. And so it's not like these businesses can stick it to you because you're still price conscious. You're not like, I'm rich, sure, charge me whatever. Like, you're still very value conscious, and there's a lot of competition for your business. There are only 3 areas in American life right now where the markets are dysfunctional and people are gouging us and just raising the prices. And you know what they are. You mentioned one of them. 1 is housing, 2 is education, and 3 is healthcare. We just keep on jacking the prices up and you feel like you have no choice but to pay. For example, why is college 250% more expensive now than it was when I went to school? Did it get 250% better? No, it did not. So they just keep raising the prices and then you feel like, well, I don't have a choice but to pay. And then the government says, well, I've got loans for you. So we're up to $1.6 trillion in student loan debt anyway. So I have independent plans to get down the inflation rate in the 3 real pain points, which are education, healthcare, and housing. Housing is the trickiest one because a lot of that stuff is local. But we need to invest in affordable housing options. And one of the things I'm passionate about, my wife mocks me for this, but I get very attracted to man caves, where she's like, we have children, we're not going to go live in a shipping container. But I'm like, wait, just live in the shipping container. It's like there are things we can do to create much more affordable housing options. And one thing I'm passionate about is more communal living arrangements, particularly for single parents. Because right now, 40% of American children are being born to single parents. And I have 2 kids myself. It is so much work feeding and looking after these kids every day. So that if you had communal living arrangements where you could cook mac and cheese on Wednesday, and then all the kids come and then eat it, and then like Thursday someone else is making sloppy joes or whatever, you can actually have more living arrangements that reflect modern reality. Because the standard nuclear family is actually not the norm anymore, and we should have housing arrangements that reflect that. So the federal government can invest in some of these new housing alternatives. The biggest thing about having this $1,000 a month in people's hands is that if landlords decide to stick it to you, then a few of you get together and say, wait a minute, there are 3 or 4 of us, that's $4,000 a month. We can actually buy that fixer-upper, we can make moves. You're actually harder to push around if you have this income that will go with you wherever you want.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the help, everyone.
Who would you like as your running mate?
Well, thanks for the question. First, I want to map the path to get there. The number 1 criteria that Democrats have for the nominee is beating Donald Trump. Very reasonable, right? People who are putting money on these outcomes have made me the heaviest favorite head-to-head against Donald Trump. I'm a 3-2 favorite. The other candidates are at best even money. So why am I such a heavy favorite against Donald Trump? In one survey, 18% of college Republicans said they'd support me over Trump. In another survey, 10% of Trump voters here in New Hampshire said they'd support me over Trump. You know who's figured this out is Donald Trump. I'm the only person in the field he has not tweeted a word about because he knows I'm better at the internet than he is. So that's how I get to that point. In my running mate, I would need someone who has a lot of Washington experience and relationships, who can call people on Capitol Hill. The same way that Barack Obama had Joe Biden as his running mate because he wanted someone who has those relationships, I would need the same thing. Because to get things done in DC, you need someone with the right relationships, they know who to call, they know how to get things done. We would need a combination of very experienced Washington hands and people who are from other industries. One of the things I would champion too is that I would appoint people from both sides of the aisle. I think good ideas and patriotism come from anywhere. And many Republicans and conservatives and independents and libertarians regard me as someone they can work with because I'm very data-driven, solutions-oriented. I just want to move the country in the right direction.
The last question.
Hi. Other than the $1,000 a month, what other initiatives do you have to promote entrepreneurship, small business, startups, etc.?
Well, thank you for the question. I've got 160 plus policy proposals on my website, so I know I'm all about this freedom dividend, but there are all like a million other things. I'm very, very passionate about small businesses and entrepreneurship. I think that they're the lifeblood of a really healthy community and economy. And it's harder than ever to be a small business person in this country, in my opinion. We talk about it like the internet is somehow this great spur to entrepreneurship. It's really not. 2 generations ago, what businesses might you have started? Hardware store, flower shop, toy store. Now none of those things makes any sense because the internet has taken them all away. And then we act like the internet is going to help you create businesses. You know what the internet's great for enabling? Self-subsistence labor. Like if you want to sell some tchotchkes on Etsy, the internet's great. If you have something in your garage you need to sell, that's great. But if you want to provide a living for yourself, your family, healthcare, the rest of it, it is not great. So we have to make it easier on small businesses in many, many ways. And this is one reason why I think the well-intended effort on the part of Democrats to raise the minimum wage to $15, I think is overly broad because there are many small businesses that would actually have to cut back and scale back on shifts and even hiring if they had to pay $15 an hour because right now they're paying less than that. We shouldn't act like small businesses are Amazon. You know, small businesses, a lot of them are just barely making it. So I would be for regulations that recognize that small businesses have a very, very different situation and operating environment than the big businesses. And I would want to encourage small business growth in any way we can, expand the SBA loan program. I think one of the biggest things that we can do for small businesses is put money into people's hands, because one of the things I've seen is that there are so many people that have something that they'd like to do that right now don't feel like they have the freedom to give it a shot. And the biggest part of that, even more than this cash in your hands, is healthcare. That right now, how many people have considered switching jobs or even starting something, but then frozen your tracks because you're like, what am I going to do about healthcare? It's so many of us, right? The fact that healthcare is linked to employment is an historical accident. It happened because of World War II. There were pay caps, and then companies were like, well, how are we going to attract workers? I guess we'll offer healthcare. And so we bolted healthcare onto the job, and it makes no sense on so many levels. So the biggest thing we could do to spur healthcare, spur entrepreneurship in small businesses, honestly, is get healthcare off the backs of families and businesses so that you can move around and know that your healthcare is going to be covered even if you're not doing the same job for the same company. Thank you very much. Let's take this together tomorrow.
Donate to Andrew Yang using any link. You can use the yanggame.com or yang2020.com/donate. All I know is that we need the donations. Meanwhile, why is my stupid camera not working? Also, meanwhile, it looks like there's gonna be a press pool over here, so we have to get my camera working ASAP. Or my gimbal working ASAP, and I think it's something to do with my case being on the phone. So let me take that off. There's definitely going to be a press pool, it looks like, after this town hall.
Thank you. Do not touch the original stuff. How many
We're taking my case completely off. There we go. Now things seem to work. Wow, thank you Brandon for the $8.88 donation to Andrew Yang. Thank you Fletcher for the $2.50 donation to Andrew Yang. Oh, what's this?
All right.
If I may, the state of New Hampshire has 3 so-called pivot counties. They voted twice for Obama before pivoting to Trump. Why do you think you're uniquely the best Democratic candidate to win over Obama?
I'm speaking directly to the problems that got Donald Trump elected in the first place. And I'm not running so much saying that Donald Trump is a problem. We need to make this accountable for the people of New Hampshire. Here in New Hampshire, we did particularly well in the swing counties. In Iowa, we think we're going to do the same thing here in New Hampshire.
Voting with their heart. Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders keep going back and forth as if this is a two-person race. A lot of people want us whether to shake that out at the top or go with the candidate of their heart, such as some of the lower tier political candidates. You're a very notorious guy, but what is your read of the argument of voters who are kind of headed in the election?
I think here in New Hampshire, a lot of this process is about who they want to send on to the rest of the country and have their ideas elevated throughout the entire primary season. And to me, many people in New Hampshire very much want to see my campaign's vision for the country at the highest possible levels. I will say too, it would be better if we had a ranked choice voting system or something where people didn't feel like they were going to quote unquote waste their vote and people could just vote their preferences. It would be a better thing for our democracy, but right now we have the system we have.
Let's do one and Alex.
I'll just jumping off of what Julia was saying. A lot of people are referring to this phenomenon as like punditry voting. Why do you think there's such a prevalence of that right now?
Well, but people get a lot of information now. There are very fast news cycles where you can get almost hourly updates on various campaigns. And so if you do have a lot of attention, you can feel like you have a sort of pundit's eye view on the race, and so you're voting on a different basis than you might have in a past time when the news cycle was once a day instead of once an hour.
All right, thanks for that.
You have the top line tomorrow. Is that considered a victory? How do you move forward and get on that debate stage and without it?
Yeah, for us, it's a little bit like, when you're trying to climb the standings in a sports league, like where if you're in a particular position, you just want to climb the person above you first and just keep on working there. So I think most people would say we're in 6th place right now. The goal is to climb over the 5th place and the 4th place and grow as high as we can.
Is there any point where we start going negative?
Sorry guys, sorry about this. Anyone else I can do anything for you?
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
big deal. Yay!
Can the kid get a picture with you?
Of course, I can't turn down this yet. How old are you?
Oh, see, there's Kaden.
2040, you might get a vote.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Andrew.
Sorry.
Just one pic, just one autograph. That's it.
Yeah, sure thing.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you guys.
Best of luck. You're the man.
Sorry. Yeah, we're excited.
What's up, Matt?
Hey, how's it
Good night.
going?
How are you?
From Twitch chat.
Hey, nice to meet you.
finally.
I caught it just
too.
How's it going?
Good. Except for camera issues during this stream.
That's good.
Oh look, there they go, the whole entourage.
Wasn't very long for pictures today. It's too bad.
No, they got a rally at 8 p.m.
Yeah, they got 2 more tonight.
Alright, look at Zach Grumman.
Bye, Zach.
Look, there he goes. Look, Zach Grumman missed me. That's so cute. Alright, I gotta run to the next one. You gonna be at the next one? Alright, hold up.
Are there events tomorrow besides
There's
the,
a rally tomorrow night.
You trying to go canvassing?
So I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow. All I know is I drove like 11 p.m. last night, like all night to get here. I got here like 8 a.m.
You're a trooper, man.
Are you the guy who came from like Europe?
No, I'm from California.
Okay, so you're here canvassing?
Yeah.
Appreciate the hard work, bro.
Yeah.
What's your real name? If you want me to
Ellery.
ask? Ellery.
Yeah.
Matt.
Yeah. If you want to knock off a packet tomorrow, I'm totally down. I'm in the Manchester office.
All right, I'll let you know.
So are you the Zach and Matt?
Yes.
Yes. I'm
Hi.
Joe Media channel.
Oh yeah.
We love watching you.
I've heard of your channel before.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Nick, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you guys.
Thanks so much for what you do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care. All right, stream. Matt has to work on a lot of his. Matt's rusty because he hasn't been on the trail in a week. But the next event, don't worry, we're gonna have flawless everything. Yang Gang, donate. We'll see you at 8 p.m. Eastern Time rally.